This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for energy on the internet, coming in from Las Vegas at Freedom Fest, and I found Max Wright, and we've been having some fun here at Freedom Fest in Vegas, and but the first question I'm going to ask you is, how did you become an anarchist?
It was a long process. I was a libertarian for about 10 years. I became very eloquent at understanding the damage that governments do in the world, and as the more you learn, the more you get there. But the final tipping point for me was reading a book which exposed my horrible lack of imagination. It was a book by Stefan Molyneux, and it was a practical guide to anarchy. And it was how, I'm sure there are many books like it on the topic that do an equally good job of explaining it. But it was just explaining how an anarchist world might perhaps actually look. And as I read the book, and it proposed solutions for roads and taking care of the poor and police, military, judicial, etc. And I was really struck by the fact of my horrific lack of imagination of not coming up with any of these solutions all by myself. And it's incredibly easy. It's certainly easy to imagine it once it's exposed to you. And so having the previous libertarian concept and understanding the evils and the hassles of government and the damage it does, to then go to, well, actually this is a serious possibility. It's certainly more morally sound than any other philosophy I know of, and that got me across the line.
Great. Yeah, the first book I read that really expanded my mind in that sense was The Market for Liberty by the Tannenbaums. Sounds like it's very similar. And so that book, at that point I was always an anarchist, I believe, at heart, but I didn't understand how an anarchist world would work. And so I was like you, and I don't know about you, I'm a fairly creative person, but these things are just not that obvious, especially if you've been born in a statist world. Every movie is cops and government, and these things just don't come to your head that easily. But so when I read Market for Liberty, and they said, well, here's how courts would work. They'd be private courts, and if the court, you do a contract, we'd do a contract, and we'd say in the contract, if we disagree, we're going to go to this court and adhere to their decision. And of course, private courts would run much better than government courts, obviously. Then now we even have it thanks to the internet with things like Judge.me, and so many people are using things like that. So yeah, it's really interesting. It blew my mind, actually. It's funny because some people, when they find out about anarchy, they kind of get scared, which I don't understand, because when I found out about it, I got super excited looking at all the possibilities, the way the world could work so much better.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, and it was just such a head slap moment, because I mean, even in the libertarian conversation, there's still people that say, well, you need government for roads and stuff, and I have to confess, embarrassingly so, on a really simple one like roads, I used to get stuck. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess you need the government for roads. And then you read the book and I go, hang on a minute, governments don't even build roads now. Property developers build roads. And I was like, it's already being solved by the free market. It was like, I was just embarrassingly simple of myself not to come up with these solutions.
Yeah, it's really a question, if the government's going to run the roads, it's who's going to neglect the roads without the government. When you look at the roads, and there was this guy just this week, who, a lot of the U.S. is falling apart now, obviously, because of all the debt and government and inflation and all that sort of stuff. And so many places have started to do things on their own. So there's this man, and he lived on a street and had a lot of potholes that were never getting fixed by the government. So he actually just started fixing them. And now he's being, I believe, charged because, of course, you can't show that how easy it is to do this stuff just all on your own. If there's a pothole in front of your house, just fix it. This is not high technology roads. It's so funny that that's one of the top things that someone who doesn't understand how the world would work without government brings up is roads. Of all the easiest things, it's not very high tech. It's pavement, and that's it.
I like it. Once it's exposed to you, it's just, you feel so silly. But then, I mean, you've got the instances of all elevators in a building service the apartments. You have this clear comparisons, like does government need to manage the elevators to make sure all the apartments are accessible? No, somehow the owners get together and make it work. It's like, well, a bunch of houses in a community, could they possibly get together and make the roads, build them and maintain them? It's not that hard to imagine, but for some reason, victims of public education, I guess.
That's a big part of it, I think. They don't teach you to be a free thinker, they teach you to memorize data. And bringing up the roads again, I hate to be the dead horse here, but if a Walmart wants to start somewhere and there's no road there, they'll build the road. This is fairly simple. And actually in Chile, we were talking about Chile earlier, where we're starting up Gulf Chile. All the highways are privatized, and they are glorious. You've never been on a better road on your life. And they actually raise the rates at certain times of the day or the week or the weekend to make sure that there's less traffic, so you don't have traffic jams. All these things. And it's funny because so many people complain about certain things in life. They say, there's all the things that people complain about are usually run by the government. They'll say, oh, the traffic sucks. It's like, yeah, well, it's public. It's collectivized. If it was privatized, there'd be entrepreneurs finding ways to make it work better. Whether they have to dig under it or build over it, or well, actually, without government regulation, we wouldn't even really, we'd be well beyond cars at this point. We'd be on hovercrafts probably. But thanks to government and IP and patents, it's really held down the technological innovations.
No question about that. And that's something that the last year, I guess, I've really started to understand that it's not enough to just be better than the government, because we're better than, like, free market solutions are better than government almost everywhere. It's not enough to just be better. You need to be resistant to violence, because at the end of the day, the government hates competition, and they will send over men with guns to destroy your business that competes with them and takes away their profit. I mean, I was reading a blog just recently. It was a gentleman leaving a former state of the Yugoslavia, and I can't remember which one. But he left. He was born there, but left the country and got educated, I think, somewhere else. Went back to start a business, and what he realised was there was layers and layers of bureaucracy, and he didn't quite understand why. And it took him 6 months or even a year trying to start a business, and he couldn't start a business there. And eventually, his friends just let him in on the secret. It's like there are just invented layers of bureaucracy to make profit centers for people. In that country, it was direct bribes. Now, they're a little bit more sophisticated about it in the West, but the layers of bureaucracy are just there to create profit centers for politicians through bribes, and even maybe something a little bit more clever than that. And so it's just clear that what we need is violent, resistant things, and that's why I mean, like, as simple as BitTorrent is an exciting way to circumvent that whole property rights thing, well, intellectual property rights stuff. And then you've got Bitcoin, which is the most exciting of all. In the world of money, there's this amazing revolution coming on, and it is completely resistant to violence, and it has a chance to succeed where, the ballot box and the Constitution have failed in limiting these governments.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so exciting, all these things that the internet is bringing us. And you're right, they are violence resistant. Bitcoin is basically just mathematical equations. You can't shoot algebra.
Nope.
You can try, and I'm sure they will try, but
they'll be disappointed.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And now, of course, you hear that just the other day, actually, Barack Obama passed a law that he's allowed to take over all communications in the U.S. in times of whenever they have their next false flag. Yeah. And so they're starting to recognize that the internet is a huge threat to the status, to collectivism. The internet and free market people and private enterprise around the world are finding ways, violent, resistant ways, which is funny because it's so funny because a lot of people think anarchists are violent. We're the exact opposite. It's unbelievable how they've twisted this whole thing around. They're all about violence, and we're like, hey, just please leave us alone. We don't want to hurt you, just don't hurt us. But that's what the government is, it's violence. And actually, I think that propagates throughout society. So people say, oh, in the US there's a lot of violent crime and a lot of violence. Well, the whole system's based on violence. It's a natural progression when you have violence from the time you're born. You're forced into a public indoctrination camp. As soon as you make some money, they take half of it. You try to drive a little too fast, someone's going to charge you money or put you in a cage. It's incredibly violent, but no one sees it. They think it's civilization. It's the opposite.
And speaking to statists, it'll be like, well, I mean, history shows violence is getting reduced. So it's like, yeah, that's because you're measuring government statistics, and you're not counting government violence. All that huge sector, the biggest purveyor of violence on the planet, is ignored. So yeah, if you ignore all that, there's a lot less violence.
Yeah, it's funny because I live in Mexico a lot of the time, and some people will say, "Oh, I was in Mexico 10 years ago, and a cop, he basically made me pay him a $50 bribe. That's terrible." He goes, "I think that's a corrupt system." I'm like, "How much taxes do you pay in the U.S. every year?" They're like, $30,000. I'm like, "Do you see anything?" They're like, "No, that's my patriotic duty." It's like, okay, you can't really talk to those other people.
Yeah, they don't join the dots on that.
No. And I think, again, public indoctrination, then they go home and watch their TV programming at night. People are basically brainwashed, and you tell them that and they think you're crazy, so I don't know what we have to do. What do you think? Do you think everything's moving in the right direction?
Certainly not everything's moving in the right direction. The question is there hope? Is there
not Barack Obama's hope?
Yeah.
And Chains, CHAINS.
Is there something exciting? I talk about that a lot in my book, if you don't mind me giving a plug. Bitcoin Revolution, Ending Tyranny for Fun and Profit, which is available on Amazon. I think you agree with this, but the centerpiece is the central banking system and the control of money. If we could somehow get rid of that and just take back control of money, because free markets cannot exist with a centralized monetary system. And its ability to pillage the people is just so great. And so if we can knock that out, then that above anything else will have a greater impact. I often say, if I was president of the world or whatever, and a genie gave me the opportunity, I could either make sound money and do nothing else, or have absolute dictatorial rule and not get rid of the central bank. I would choose to get rid of the central bank and have fair money and do nothing else, because it's the most important thing. And Bitcoin is really that opportunity.
Yeah, when did you first get into Bitcoin?
Relatively recently, so it was about, I think that I purchased my first Bitcoin at the end of last year, end of 2012. Yeah, so it's relatively recent.
And you already wrote a book on it?
Already wrote a book. I went in deep and hard and spoke to everybody I could, went to all the conferences that I could, and it's such an exciting world. And for all the entrepreneurs out there are so many different business avenues that you can do, and tremendous opportunity in the space.
Yeah, it's a real revolution, and it's almost like the internet. The internet was a revolution in communications. Bitcoin's a revolution in money and banking. And just like the internet brought tons and tons of opportunities for entrepreneurs, I think Bitcoin will as well. And for anyone who hasn't even used it yet, just start using it. And as soon as you start to use it, you really, if you're an entrepreneurial-minded person, you can't go a few minutes without going, this needs this, there's something needed here, that someone should be providing this service. It's a wealth of entrepreneurial potential. Unfortunately for me, I'm so busy, I actually started, people know, I kind of got involved with the Bitcoin ATM. Didn't really work out, mostly because the government squashed it. They wanted a $25 million dollar insurance bond just to have a few Bitcoin ATMs in the US. That's fascist monopoly, and so I kind of let that go. And I've just been so busy with this Gulch in Chile right now that I'm not entering into Bitcoin businesses, but I see it all the time, and if I wasn't busy, I'd be jumping all over it. I think Bitcoin poker sites, you can just go on and on. You can go on and on forever. And what's really interesting, chatting to some VC friends of mine in the space, is they've never seen anything like it. It's where the money is coming in, and there is actually more VC money around than there are entrepreneurs willing to accept it to start a business. Yeah. So the opportunities are crazy, and people, if you have a good idea and have some kind of a track record at business skills, then there are people wanting to throw money at you to start a Bitcoin business. Yeah, were you at the last Bitcoin conference in New York by any chance? No, I wasn't, but I heard about it. Yeah, I know some of the people, and they invited me, and I said I couldn't go because I'm too busy. But they're like, do you know anyone who knows anything about Bitcoin? Because we have so much money, they'll just throw it at you. Like, come on, entrepreneurs, anarchists, this is how you make money. Get out there, do something. Yeah, sure. So, anything else you want to talk about? Or? No. That's basically it? Yeah. Well, that's been very interesting. We'll definitely put a link to your book. I love the title. I didn't know that title before this. That's awesome. And yes, that's it from Freedom Fest. This has been your home for Anarchy on the Internet, Anarchast. Peace, take care, love, and anarchy.